How do we understand what is happening in the mind of Google, at least in the search side of things? We're digging into patents and algorithms with Bill Slawski today on The Edge.
Go! Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. Powered by your digital marketing pioneers, Site Strategics. This week's featured guest is Bill Slawski, Director of SEO Research at Go Fish Digital. Now, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
This is Edge of the Web. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. Every week we bring you amazing guests to chat about digital marketing news. We unpack a key marketing concept for our digital marketing audience. So whether you're a part of an agency or a freelancer or part of a marketing firm, this show is for you. Be sure to check out all the recent shows over at edgeofthewebradio.com. Edge of the Web is actually brought to you by Site Strategics, the title sponsor of our show, pioneers in the agile digital marketing. Our core specialties are SEO, technical SEO, SEM, social media management, conversion rate optimization, and omni-channel marketing. Agile marketing that actually is results-based marketing that works. So if you're interested in what we can do for you, give us a call at 877-SEO for web, or I'll break it down because nobody wants to do the vanity number, 877-736-4932. Want to make sure you check out some of the recent shows of Edge of the Web. Make sure you check out the Andrew Optimize, Pedro Diaz, and Carolyn Leiden, as well as the Mark Trapp-Hagen shows as of late. Had some great times with them. And if you're interested in being part of the show, simply drop us a line over at info@edgeofthewebradio.com. Make sure you set your reminders on YouTube to get notified when we drop our videos, as a number of other things inside the YouTube channel. Make sure you check out our weekly news podcast covering the most recent digital marketing news topics and Google updates. We're dropping it every Tuesday to help you navigate your digital marketing week. So we're continuing to have our guest host along with us for the ride. That's Morty Oberstein, SEO liaison over at Wix. So for that's the entire housekeeping of the show. Let's meet this week's industry expert guest. So let's introduce you to Bill Slawski. He's worked as a solo consultant and agency SEO since presently he's a director of SEO research at Go Fish Digital. He's been involved in internet marketing and web promotion since 1996. He's written over 1,000 posts on his site, SEO by the Sea, and more on the Go Fish blog as well about search patents and papers from search engines. He's also worked with a wide range of sites from nonprofits to Fortune 500. He's also known for his research related to patent filings from search engines. So his experience actually includes Fortune 500 brands, some of the largest websites in the world. Bill's contributing author to Moz, Search Engine Land, and Search Engine Journal. And over the last 7 years, he spoke at industry-leading conferences, except for last year, about topics including search engine algorithms, universal and blended search, personalization in search, search and social and duplicate content problems, structured data, and schema. I don't know if I've actually mentioned more technical SEO issues in one sentence than I did just now. So this is Bill's third time on the show. We wanted to bring him on to help guide us into the new horizon of machine learning and natural language processing in the realm of entities. But first, Bill, share with us where you've come from in your own words. I gave you the professional bio here, but give us something that we don't know. And again, thank you so much for joining us on your third visit to Edge. We really do appreciate it.
And say, if you're not careful, it all runs together.
It does. It does into supercalifragilistic SEO schema, right?
So back in 2004, 2005, I gave a presentation in an SES in New York City.
Yeah.
And I mentioned a paper by a Microsoft researcher. At the time, he was at Microsoft. His name was Mark Majork. Mm-hmm. And the paper he co-authored was called Spam, Damn Spam, and Statistics.
Okay.
And it looked at ways of determining whether or not something was spam. And one of the research projects I did was looking at domain registrations in Germany. And people who were spamming websites would buy domains and create subdomains on them. And they would put hyphens in the subdomain names. So the more hyphens that were in subdomain names, the more likely that a domain, a subdomain, was spam.
Oh my Lord.
So the statistic was count the number of subdomains in the subdomain, or hyphens in subdomain name, and that's how spammy it's going to be.
How many did you count in this paper?
Well, the paper itself didn't have too many of those, but it was a good example.
Sure.
And I've sort of kept an eye out for things written by Mark Najork since then. And one of the things he wrote was, or co-authored, was a recent paper from Google, because he left Microsoft. They had a bunch of people leave them, and he joined Google. And Google's using natural language processing, pre-training language models on things. And they were, the most famous for a while was BERT.
Right.
And they've come out with a newer one, which they have said hasn't launched yet, but could in days to weeks to months to years to come. So we don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, when they introduced RankBrain, they told us we've already been running this for a few months. Right?
Exactly.
So we had to guess when it started. When they introduced Hummingbird, they introduced it on Google's 15th birthday. And again, they sort of they said, this has been around for a little while.
So they're not really actually forthcoming of launching something new. It's always, it's in the works. It's been working. And this gets you into what you've been investigating for the longest time. It's actually the Google patents. So there's a continual buildup of Google patents that are submitted. And it's not just one sizable thing that actually encompasses a large algorithm change. Obviously, it's all piecemeal. It's broken apart in different facets that are actually focused on different concepts of entities and different interrelationships of data, right?
Right. So one of the new patents I ran across was on using machine learning to rank pages. And one of the co-authors of that, I believe, was Mark Najork. Mm-hmm. So they stick around and they keep on publishing stuff.
Yeah, they do. So could you actually mention some of the innovators that have been behind some of these patent submissions of recent years? Because if there's an entire probably gallery of individuals that have been doing this that you know personally, probably, right?
Yeah. So there are people. It's like reading your favorite books in a bookstore. You go look for certain authors. You say, I want to find a Stephen King novel because I want to get the bejesus scared out of me. Right?
I do see the parallel of Stephen King to SEO for some reason.
So I need to find a Tristram Upstill novel, Tristram Upstill patent, because he was a head of core search at Google for 4 or 5 years. And if he was doing that job, he was into some deep stuff. From a search. And Google answers when I mention him or mention Google.
Absolutely.
So I want to find these people. I want to see what they mean when they start talking about, we're not going to rank on relevance or Irish words. We're going to rank on authority. Mm-hmm. And we're going to rank on categorical authority. What in the world is meant by categorical authority? So Google starts introducing some of these terms like neural networks.
Yep.
That you hear Danny Sullivan talk about neural matching and say, okay, there are pages on how search works at Google that talk about concepts similar to neural matching. They talk about different intents and different topics and how the meanings of words change over time.
Absolutely.
Words have different meanings. There's a patent called content vectors, which gives the example of horses. And it says a horse to an equestrian is an animal. A horse to a carpenter is a tool. A horse to a gymnast is an exercise implement.
Right.
And there are different ways when we come across the word horse on a web page to determine what that page is about, which type of thing audience it was made for. We're grabbing what we're calling context terms from those pages. And a context term is something that's getting indexed. And Google can look and see if you've got a page that mentions horses and people found it based on the use of the word horse, and it mentions stirrups and saddles and thoroughbreds.
Right.
Those are context terms. And that tells us that page is about horses.
Absolutely.
It's not a page for gymnasts or for carpenters.
So the concept here is how well you can actually provide context to the subject matter that you're actually providing, as opposed to days gone by of just keywords, repetitive keywords, keyword density. Mm-hmm. If you can get as many high volume search phrases on a particular page, and we all understand, anybody who's listened to the show over the years that we've been doing it, that's long gone, that particular strategy. But the deal is that understanding context and understanding how Google understands context, that's what you've been honing in on, because Google's intent is to understand, not just serve up pages on PageRank, for example. They're actually trying to understand. That's where the pagination ranking has come into play, where it's actually reading paragraph to paragraph contextual relationships, right? These
concepts keep on appearing. Google has a new head of search, mm-hmm. and he's got a long name. It's Indian. I can't pronounce it. I'm not going to try. But you can find his. It's a book on modern information retrieval. Mm-hmm. It's from Stanford University, and it's very long. It's very detailed, and the first things it starts with is inverted index for phrases, for inverted index for words. And it'll tell you some words appear more frequently in a corpus and some words appear less frequently. They're much more rare. But the number of times a word appears in a document is going to determine how relevant it is for that word. And another researcher at Google, Anna Patterson, came out with something called phrase-based indexing. Mm-hmm. And there are about 20 related patents. I like looking at the fact that there might be related patents, because it gives me a sense of evidence of how likely it is that a patent has been granted.
Absolutely.
Because how many things are related to it. So there's another one that's inverted index for phrases, like inverted index for words, except they're looking for frequently co-occurring phrases that appear on pages that rank for certain terms. So this related phrase-based indexing came out with an inverted index for phrases. Mm-hmm. And it told us where all the phrases were, that complete and meaningful phrases, things that weren't idioms. So if you have a page about the White House of the United States, it's going to include phrases like Oval Office or Secretary of State or Rose Garden interview.
Right.
And these, you can look at these phrases and they'll predict what the page they appear on is about. Because they give you a good sense of how these phrases might appear on pages about White House or President of the United States. And they tend to be headings for pages like that.
So we're getting further and further away from kind of the Rosetta Stone of a particular phrase. We're getting into these concepts of supporting concepts that don't have any type of root association. They're much more contextual. And on top of that, we're getting even further into like these concentric circles of influence, where we're dealing with even more tangential phrases, and then you actually start connecting to different concepts away from that, right?
So let me tie these together.
Yes.
Quickly, there was a computer science researcher who is famous for the phrase, "You shall know a word by the company it keeps."
There you go.
And this, with those phrases, they're constantly co-occurring phrases that appear on pages that are predictive of what the page is about. So we're seeing Google playing with language models and understanding how words are connected to each other. So we have something like BERT, or we have something like MUM, this multi-model language model, mm-hmm. that shows us how different things that appear on pages are connected to other things that are similar to them. So when you use certain words, it's likely other words will also appear on that same page.
Absolutely.
And that's much more complex than latent semantic indexing, but it's the same concept.
So for a marketer, a search engine marketer that is looking to be able to position content and with a level of relevancy that Google's looking for, we're no longer, we're not in Kansas anymore when it comes down to how we need to feed the engine, because we're trying to define content as relevant. Therefore, we have to understand the mapping of that mind, the contextual mind that we're talking about. These operant context phrases that are being understood and defined by Google. Now, Google's not giving us the map of what it's understanding. So, are we going to see an evolution of how we do research around the topic, not the topic itself anymore? And again, content marketing has been there for a good long time. What are people talking about trending around this particular topic? But we're really talking about much more of this relational model of entities, and you've been spearheading this for the longest time, but actually creating almost these mini wikis at a page level or a site level to be able to validate to Google that you are not only talking about one particular topic, but you're supporting this concept with all of these different tendrils of information, right?
So I had a client who had an apartment building complex.
Yes.
And they're trying to sell apartments. And there weren't too many apartments in the complex sold. They had a website, a web page, 4 pages long. It failed to tell you very much about the complex, the apartment complex, except that they had a dog park around the apartment building.
Got it.
What they didn't tell you was that you could get on the elevator to the building, go down to the basement, get off from the basement to the Washington, D.C. Metro line. And you're connected to the whole metro. There's an underground cluster around Arlington, Virginia, that takes you all around northern Virginia, southern Maryland, and Washington, D.C. And you can visit all 39 Smithsonian institutes that are connected to the metro line.
Right.
And there's no charge for those. You can go free. So if you have kids, you can take your kids to a different museum every week. There's a shopping mall attached to that metro line that's one of the largest shopping malls in the state of Virginia. It's like 4 stories tall, and it's just a short scoot away. You've got all the Starbucks and other coffee places you might want to go to, and other restaurants too. If you've ever driven through Washington, D.C., you know what a frustrating process that is.
You better believe it.
It can take you a long time to get from point A to point B. If you're on the metro line, you can get there a lot faster.
Absolutely.
And Metro, the DC Metro is an important entity that should have been mentioned and talked about a lot on their website, because it can tell you you're living in this apartment complex. There are lots of places you can go. You want to go catch a Washington football team game, Nationals game, you hop on the Metro. You're less than 15 minutes away.
And all that's not only an entity in a relationship to a apartment building, but it's also useful for the consumer. So there's this nexus that's happening of utilitarian concepts, right, for the consumer.
Right. Location is a wonderful thing for real estate.
Absolutely.
If you know what else is around you, you know where the schools are, you know where the post offices are, you can live. You can run all your errands quickly.
So these anecdotal references of entities and content relationships, this is what we're now need to be feeding up to Google to be able to be able to even tie in almost like pattern recognition. Yes, we know this is the subject and this is what we know about this. This is who we are in this space, because Google's making these neural connections between concepts and entities, and if you match closely, then it's going to favor you as a resource, as a valuable asset into its understanding, right? So
you're tying these entities into search too.
Yep, absolutely.
So it can be easier doing this entity stuff than doing SEO. Assignment I had was to get a page on a website to rank in 2005 for Baltimore Black history.
Got it.
And rewrote a page, included the phrase Baltimore Black history like 5, 6, 7, 8 times, whatever, to try to get to rank for that, because we were matching documents in the query to words in a document.
Sure.
Right? So after about a month or so, the page really hadn't gotten ranked any higher than 114th or so. So I sent a remote message to my copywriter and said, okay, write us a replacement page. Tell us about some of the entities in Baltimore that you can take a walking tour of. You can see this 9-foot-tall statue of Billie Holiday, these townhomes owned by Frederick Douglass on the waterside in the Inner Harbor. All these famous historical churches and schools.
Right.
People like Sojourner Truth. There are a lot of famous people. There's a big history. So if you're going to rank well for Black history in Baltimore, if you've got the page and people go to learn about Black history in Baltimore, you're going to rank well for it.
So you're telling me that this was happening in 2005.
This was happening in 2005, right.
So the scenario here is that we've been in this space, and it gets back to the original point, is that they've been doing this for a while. It's just even more transparent now than ever before, right? And they're more forthcoming about this neural net. So many SEOs have been in the game of titles, headlines, wordsmithing, trying to squeeze as much as they could out of the performance of a particular page.
I get the stupid idea in my head that if I had a page that ranked for a lot of these long tail terms,
right,
that it would rank well for the overall topic. And it did.
And it did. Absolutely. I tell you what, as an example, we literally optimized about 10 years ago a racing company in the IndyCar racing circuit, and we did exactly that. We actually put together a cluster. Each and every IRL race, right? We put together a branch of content around how do you find tickets, where are the hotels, parking directions, right? All the different information around that content, that concept. And guess what? We actually outranked in the IndyCar series race site, as well as each and every racetrack, because they hadn't been doing this. It's contextual. It's also consumer oriented, because that's exactly what the consumers were looking for. So
the BBC was building ontologies around things like the World Cup and the Olympics, like 10 years ago,
right,
for the same purpose.
Absolutely.
They were outranking other people because people were interested in those events. They want to know what was going on with the World Cup in London and the London Olympics. And the BBC had pages on them. And the pages were so well done, you could turn on the computer and find out when things were on TV.
Right from them. All right, beautiful, beautiful. So a sidebar here, because I want our audience who haven't come across these particular phrases before, give us your understanding of the weight of impact of taxonomies and ontologies first and foremost, because I want our audience to listen to you actually describe what these two players are when it comes down to search.
There's a paper from Google called Biperpedia, which came out around 2013. And they talk about going through the query logs of the search engine. You get millions of people searching every day. if you collect information about the queries they perform and the format of those queries, you understand the canonical versions of those queries and how they're shaped, what people ask for when they ask questions about certain types of things. You're understanding. Taxonomy is a way of organizing things by categories so that things that are broader and things that are more specific are at different levels. But you're building a way of understanding how things are categorized. You have like a car, it's broken down into different systems.
Right.
You have mufflers, you have engines, you understand where all the parts are. And how they're connected to each other and the different levels of connection.
I use a euphemism as like a file drawer and sub-file drawers, right, underneath there. You're organizing that, and that's much more aligned to the structural the structure of a website. But it's not just structure; it's organization and the navigation of organization, right?
So ontology is more complex than taxonomy, because an ontology tells you about how things are related.
There you go.
It's the relationships that are important. And that's what gets important when we start talking about knowledge graphs.
Yep.
And when Google talks about a knowledge graph, by the word knowledge, they mean relationship. How are these things related to each other?
Exactly.
We have entities within entities within entities. And they've got facts for all of those. And we want to know certain things about certain types of entities, like dates of birth, dates of origin, whether they're members of something, if they have parent organizations. What are the connections between these things? Who's married to whom? We want to know how which actors showed up in certain movies with Tom Hanks.
Right.
I lived 10 miles south of Robert Duvall, who was in Apocalypse Now and is well known for the statement, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." And he used to love riding horses. There was a big horse riding stable in the town he lived in Virginia called the Plains, which had a polo grounds and a big polo event. I don't know if he ever attended that, but it was a short distance away from where he lived, so it probably did.
So there's a relationship, and you're filling in the gaps. You're filling in the gaps, and that's the ontological side of things. It's not just filing it down to the nth degree of understanding. It's also mapping the relationships, and that's what Google's Knowledge Panel is trying to understand. And if you can actually do that from your content creation of your website, and it's not just content, it has to be reinforced by the outside world of value. But you start building this relationship model that Google can actually rely on.
So the language models that Google's building now, they're looking at, like a BERT or a MUM.
Right.
They're actually going over the content from web pages, reading it based upon things they've been trained on. So they've likely taken these models, trained them on the whole corpus of the Wikipedia,
right,
and the book scanning project at Google,
yep,
which covered lots of books. And so they know lots about them. So this language model can recognize entities and call them out. And they're looking for proper nouns. They're looking for places, people, and things. And they're looking for fact patterns related to those. Dates of birth, what people might be known as. They're creating what's known as triples.
Okay.
So a triple is a subject, a verb, and an object. So they're going to say a certain entity and then a verb like is a, or knows about,
right,
or is a member of, or plays for. And then they'll come up with some verb. The Society of Plastic Engineers, the Washington Nationals, Michelle Obama. These are all the things that are connected somehow.
Right.
And there are things they have knowledge graphs which have the reasons why these things are connected to the other things.
So if I could be so bold, part of the opportunity for content strategists for websites are to be able to fill in those holes and be able to reinforce those connections. So as a sidebar here, one more step along this train of this, not only this SEO philosophy, but this SEO tactical plan is where do latent semantic indexing actually, where does that come into play as we're talking about the taxonomy and the ontological relationship?
So latent semantic indexing is sort of a misnomer.
Okay, that's why I wanted to get there. Yep.
It was developed in pre-web days,
Okay.
like 1988, 89. And it was developed by the telephone company, Bell Labs. One of the researchers was Susan Dumas, who went on from working at Bell Labs to working at Microsoft and working on Microsoft Windows and subjects like findability and Microsoft Windows. But back in the days of Bell Labs, they were taking these small enterprise databases,
Yeah.
like 8 books worth. The patent itself shows an example with 8 books. They took 8 books worth of material and they built a database out of it, and it was searchable because they indexed it with latent semantic indexing. So they knew what the words meant and how they were related to each other in those 8 books. And the patent says if we're going to add data to this database, we need to run the latent semantic indexing over again to capture all the connections between the words. So every time you need to add data, you need to run the indexing.
Got it.
So the web, as it exists now, with all the deletions, all the additions, comments, changes, the way people restructure things and so on, doesn't remain the same very long. It changes all the time. And a latent semantic indexing isn't adequate because you just would spend all your time indexing.
Understood. It's a constant re-engineering, and it doesn't feed the actual machine learning.
So somebody took latent semantic indexing and modified it for paid search, and they came out with a version they refer to as probabilistic latent semantic indexing, which uses statistics.
Got it.
It no longer just uses the corpus of the small data set. It uses statistics to guess. So chances are Google uses probabilistic latent semantic indexing, but not latent semantic indexing.
Are those statistics coming from keyword volume and patterns that are actually recognized for that particular connection?
Right. As Google says when you ask them questions about how do you know about all those links, they say we have lots and lots of computers.
They've got barges of computers. All right, so I truly appreciate this rundown of these operant phrases that should be the lexicon of the new SEO career path. It's not things. I'm sorry, it's not strings. It's things. To quote Emmett Singal back in 2012.
And another phrase they'd like to use back then to describe it was real world objects.
There you go. And that's a fluid concept too, is it not?
It means that entities are language agnostic. So when you have the color blue in English, it's a different word than in French or German.
And all those are different patterns that have to be fed as well.
But it's still blue in all those.
There you go. So basically, Google is the largest translator on the face of the planet to be able to actually connect that. And all we need now is a Babelfish, a Google Babelfish, to be able to stick in our ear, to be able to understand these concepts.
And Google Lens supposedly is doing that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Bill, let's end up this particular segment and jump into our next segment where we're going to be talking about a number of these additional issues as well as BERT and MUM. We just had to do the precursor to get everybody well oiled in understanding these different concepts. Is that good with you, sir?
Sure.
I think we all do nowadays, but you search for something unique to most of us. You're looking for patents as well as authors of patents. You are basically you're panning for gold, almost like in scientific journals. This is where Bill basically spends his time. Yeah,
so if I read the patent, I'd say, okay, who are the authors?
Right.
Let me look them up. Let me look in LinkedIn and see where they worked at Google.
Right.
Let me see what else they've done.
You're tracking their career path as well. Yeah.
So I looked up one guy named James Hogue, who went on from Google to Foursquare.
Okay.
And he was in charge of something. I searched for him. I found his resume, and that gave lots of details of the things that he'd done. And one of those was he was in charge of a project at Google called the Annotation Network, which meant he supervised a number of search engineers who were writing patents about the semantic web and local search. And he was also responsible for the acquisition of MetaWeb and Freebase. Because you not only do the research, but you also hire people who do that work too. So if your research doesn't turn out, you can use theirs. It's a clever approach.
Capitalism is everywhere, right?
Right.
So one could say, I'm intending this pun completely, you're actually tracking down the entities of the patent submitters and their relationship contextually to the rest of the search engineering world, right?
Because you can understand how things are related better.
There we go. See, I told everybody that your search patterns are a little bit different than most. All right. So, and we did cover a lot of kind of basic ground in our first segment of understanding ontological taxonomy, entity relationships, and now natural language processing. Now I want to pull us around to understanding BERT. And first and foremost, we've been in the BERT world for about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, as Google defines it, or at least publicly. But we've been in this space for a very long time before that, right?
It does go back all the way to latent semantic indexing in the early 80s, before there was a search web. But yeah, it's a matter of creating a language model. And for a while, Google was using something called n-grams, where they were learning about language and content based upon how many words long or how many syllables long they were. So a 3-gram or a 4-gram would have 3 words or 4 words. And they would grab all the 3-word combinations off a page or all the 4-word combinations off a page and run statistics on them to see what type of punctuation they had, what type of words were collected together, stuff like that. And they would do things like determine site quality based upon these n-grams. They would compare the IRS to some carburetor site. Right. And try to see which they thought was a better written site based upon these n-grams, and a statistical language model based on those n-grams.
So that's where, as SEOs, we were writing long tail phrases, long tail concepts. That's our iteration of the n-grams, is to be able to actually connect the dots with not only these root highly trafficked terms, but also these long tail matching connections to n-grams, right?
So this language model concept, they went on to say, okay, we're going to look for these co-occurring words, and we're going to look for parts of speech. We're going to have these language models actually do the training on these content pieces, so that we don't have to identify all the entities and then tell and write out whether things are subject, verbs, nouns, pronouns, adverbs, adjectives. We can have a computer program do that for us.
So BERT stands for bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. Now, for everybody playing at home, right, that's probably so Greek that it's like lorem ipsum. But what we're talking about here are the adverbs and the verbs acting upon the nouns to be able to understand the relationship of not only the nouns, but what the intent is of the user, right?
So that statement I came out before, you should know a word by the company it keeps,
Yep.
applies here. Because it tells us that if certain phrases, certain words appear in a language model, other words are appearing near it. So when someone searches for New York Times puzzle, they probably mean a specific type of puzzle. And if you do a search on Google right now for New York Times puzzle, you'll see references to crossword puzzles.
But this is not proximity. This is not proximity. Forgive me for interrupting. I'm sorry. This is not proximity. This is existence on a page, existence in paragraphs, existence on different pages. That's the proximity. That's actually moving from center mass now, right?
Right. Every time you see somebody mention New York Times puzzle somewhere, anywhere, it's usually a crossword puzzle.
Right.
It's usually those words co-occur near each other. So they're rewriting that query to say they mean a crossword puzzle. Let's add the word crossword.
So this represents kind of a reference to this deep neural network concept that we're starting to form in our minds, which is already the map that Google has. It's the relationships, but it's also these are the activating factors of connection.
So we think about real world objects. In our heads, they're filled with entities. We know about people, places, we know facts related to things.
Right.
We know these connections between things. We know the relationships and the taxonomies and the ontologies because it's what our heads contain. So they build a language model that contains those things too. And it can take content that somebody writes and say, okay, these are things they've written about this topic. They left out this and this and this, but we found that in other documents that are on the same thing.
But BERT was the stepping stone to understanding intent more than any other recent algorithm, because you're actually understanding these action items that are in between the nouns or the proper subjects. And now Google's actually moving towards understanding so much more about what you're really looking for and how you want to use it.
The same word appears lots of times because words that have the same meaning that are spelled the same, polysemous words, it's about 40% of all words mean more than one thing. So if you're looking at a large corpus, a large body of words, you're going to see the same word over and over again, but you're going to see it in different contexts.
And that bears repeating. 40% of our language has multiple meanings, and a good deal more than just two. So that's the intent that we're talking about. That's the breakdown in the relationship. And keep on going. I just wanted to make sure our listeners understood that.
I think that was an important point to bring out. So yeah, snow means the same thing in Sweden and Alaska, but it means something very different in Alabama.
All right. So this is how we're beginning to understand intent and understand the differences of the entities. Now let's get our audience to understand MUM, right? The multitask unified model. I'm gonna open it up for you. Give us an understanding of how MUM, because we're kind of progressional here. We talked about all these different pieces in the first episode where we've gone through the BERT car on this train. Now MUM's the word. Had to say it because, there's the pump.
So I saw an example of MUM this week. There was a researcher for Google called Zin Luna Dong who worked on structured language for Google. And she worked in the department where she was working on things like knowledge graph.
Yep.
And knowledge base and trustworthiness. And she left Google to join Amazon, and Amazon is a big seller of products, right? And they decided we don't just want a knowledge graph, we want a product graph.
Hmm.
So we want all this information collected about all the products we sell and all the products that everybody sells. So we don't just want to collect relationship information about those products. We want to understand things like GTINs, the identifiers related to those products. We want to be able to put pictures with words. We want to build a multimodal model.
There you go. And so all sorts of mediums. If you're talking text, if you're talking visual, video, what have you, they all have this interrelationship, right?
And not only just the different things other than language and pictures and so on. They want to understand formats.
There you go.
They want to understand the way a page might be formatted differently based upon what the page might be about.
Unpack that for me.
You go to Zappos site, you see lots of pictures of shoes.
Right.
You see them in a certain format. Like you go to a page, there might be tabs, there might be stuff like that. They'll tell you about sizes. They'll tell you about, they'll break down to men's shoes, women's shoes, and so on. But the idea is to give you a sense of how these things might be displayed best.
Got it.
So things like shoes, you tend to show shoes from at least two different perspectives.
Understood. So now they're actually gravitating around how often formats actually support a particular concept, format of pages and the mediums themselves, right?
Right.
Okay, understood. Okay, so we've got this MUM, this unified model of understanding that a particular subject or entity may have a different pattern of formats about this product. So it's no longer the entities and what actually, it's almost like triangulation. You're trying to figure out what this thing is by like a 20 question game, right?
Yeah.
And now you're actually looking at what mediums and format actually constitute a real understanding of that. And the MUM kind of the mashup that Google's going to be doing here is as you search, you'll be seeing different formats of results as opposed to 10 blue links.
And they're trying to get information from the best sources they possibly can and for the right reasons. So we had another patent that was about searching for quotes. And Google, at one point in time, the very first version of that patent said, we'll search for quotes in knowledge bases. And they updated the patent. They referred to it as a continuation patent, where they changed the claims. And the third version of the patent said, it didn't say we're not going to search in knowledge bases anymore. It said we're going to search in videos for those quotes.
Okay.
And they didn't explain one of the reasons. And one of the reasons is when people search for a quote, they usually know who the speaker is and they know what it's about. They just want to see the person saying that, or they want to show someone else the person saying that.
All right, so let me ask you this as a sidebar about this. Hey, you're talking about a particular slice in time of how a product is represented, both in format and relationship to entities. Is MUM going to be in the space where it evolves over time? Because what we're talking about is how we searched 20 years ago, how we searched 10 years ago is wholly different based on the content that we're navigating. Are we going to be in this fluid environment where it's almost like a self-serving scenario, is that we'll want to see different formats, search on different formats, and MUM will actually then match up that intent to the different format and different mediums? Are we now on a roller coaster ride with Google to be able to change how we search, change not only our intent, but also the formats in which we want to actually get that feedback? Or did I just go off the rails?
It's sort of like when you search for pizza and Google knows you don't want a page about the history of pizza.
Right.
You don't want a list of recipes on how to make pizza.
Yep.
You want a phone number for a place you can call to bring you pizza so you can eat lunch. They understand the intent.
He made it much more simple than I did. So,
Search engine's job is very simple. They're filling either the informational or situational needs of a searcher.
right.
And in that case, with delivering you a slice of pizza, Google's acting as a vehicle to get you fed.
And based on the traction of the connect, the click throughs and the on top of that, the order transactions, because Google's certainly listening to that space as well. It now knows that it gave you what you're intending. So now it's an affirmation model, right? That we got them there. This is what they wanted. Mom is no longer going to be answering questions in different context, but it's also going to be literally changing how users inquire and being reinforced by user behavior, right?
And like the rest of BERT, it's going to know when you're missing words in your query. It's going to know maybe what you left out.
One
of the earliest versions of Hummingbird was they gave an example of a query that was rewritten by Hummingbird. And it was, can you tell me about a place that serves good lasagna? And the idea is that the word place was being substituted by the word restaurant. So the person searching using that query was looking for a restaurant, a reference, a recommendation for a restaurant.
Got it.
And they were rewriting the query using Hummingbird to find restaurants.
All right. So for our audience, we want to make sure we give them a break here, because we're deep in it and we're understanding that there's a lot longer highway to go down, and we're certainly seeing right now the machine learning and the active learning based on user behavior now. So this is where we are, folks. And if you don't have an SEO strategy that's actually connecting the dots for these entities and understanding that, you know what, you want to feed up certain types of format if you're trying to get ranked. If you're providing e-com for shoes, you better be able to follow suit on how Google's understanding the format needed to make decisions on shoes. And unless you're paying attention to those things, you're going to move yourself away from true legitimacy of ranking value. So it's no longer a keyword, it's no longer a search phrase, it's an entity and serving up the format that the users want. Just to summarize where we've been so far.
Well, we are fortunate.
Absolutely.
We are fortunate in that machine learning works on the basis of taking some of these older concepts like information retrieval concepts,
right?
Certain words in titles, in headings, the keywords that maybe potentially get used. And when they show search results, they're showing those search results based upon the probability that somebody might click on one of those. But they're basing it on those information retrieval concepts that we learned about earlier.
And way back when, and this is a great segue to the paper that you wrote back in 2013, and that was regarding the WAVI acquisition, and it had to do with the open domain language understanding. So unpack that before we finish up there.
Okay. So I like looking at the acquisitions because it gives you a sense. I mentioned MetaWeb, and the guy worked on the annotation network, and right. Was also in charge of the M&A for MetaWeb and Freebase, because if you can't develop the technology, you buy it and you come out with it that way. So in 2013, Google acquired a company called WAVI. WAVI was a product of a artificial intelligence engineer from University of Washington called Oren Etzioni, who now works for Paul Allen out of Seattle, and they're doing artificial intelligence. They're the Artificial Intelligence Institute, mm-hmm. and he did a few other startups. But WAVI was following a process called open domain information extraction.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, okay, if you took a Google bot, and instead of searching for all the pages and redirects and stuff like that, it started reading all the words. And it no longer focused upon a focused crawl of the web to find certain information about certain types of things, but read everything and collected all the information about everything, sorted it, and organized it, and made it findable again. That's the idea behind
that acquisition, and
a language model could do.
Absolutely. And this is back in 2013. You certainly were seeing this way before that, but this was the pattern that you were seeing. And again, there
are reflections of that go back in time further. Yeah. You can go back to 2007 with object-oriented learning at Microsoft Asia Research. And they were working on, it wasn't even called Bing yet, it was called MSN.
Yep.
And there was MSN product search that was based upon these entities and finding attributes for products. And they let you search for them. Or they had a scholar-based search where they collected patterns about names of papers, authors, publishers, so on, and collected all that information and built a search database out of those. And they were referring to it as object-oriented because they weren't using the word entities. They were calling them objects.
So this couples with key concepts like brand SERP, like Jason Bednar talks about, and all the different vertical knowledge points that are supporting a particular key industry, and the EAT, the expertise, authority, and trust factor when it comes down to citable resources in niche as well as large industries. There's different groups, different references that need to be mined and be able to be leveraged to be able to explore and be able to give yourself juice in that space. So we're seeing these patterns happening across all these different things, these spectrums in local as well as expertise type of optimization. So this backs everything. This is what you've been looking at.
So this sort of begs the question: what does a search engine do? And what a search engine does at this point is, it's no longer just an index of the web. It answers questions.
Right.
And people, when they come out with a query, they don't want a list of 10 blue links. You can do a query, what are restaurants in New York City? And you'll get a list of links to restaurants in New York City. You can ask the same question in a slightly different way and say, what are the best restaurants in New York City? And you're not expecting a list of links. Now you're expecting a statement, a paragraph saying you should go here. This has this type of food that you like a lot.
So it's trying to solve problems at the same time, not only understanding what you need and answering a question, but also predicting what your next steps are to be able to give you as much value out of that interaction as possible, right?
Right. It's trying to fulfill your situational informational needs.
So that gives, wow.
Same purpose,
yep.
simple purpose, doing it slightly differently.
This is where we are, folks. This is what we have to answer. And how to and Bill, how do you help guide SEOs? Because it can seem like a insurmountable task to be able to feed Google this information, to be able to create such value. So what kind of guidance do you give SEOs in this is undiscovered country, although Google's been there and planted a few flags for a long time. How do we navigate these new waters?
Help people understand what their website's doing, what its purpose is, how it reaches people, what they're looking for on the site, what makes them act the most. Whether it's a limos site and people aren't used to taking limos, but you're showing them how easy it is to take a limo, to declare a personal holiday, or some type of gathering or get together or event using a limo.
Got it.
And make it easier for them to rent and take one somewhere. Or find an apartment building in New York City, in Washington, that makes it easy to get around the traffic because you can go right down to the basement and take the metro line. You're giving solutions to problems.
I keep on hearing being useful to the consumer.
Yeah.
And does it boil down to just that, just being useful and being able to find out more information so you can be that one-stop shop of information based on your particular consumer. Is that it?
I worked in state government for 14 years.
I am so sorry.
We got lots of phone calls. We got lots of people asking questions. They want answers, right?
Right.
If they're asking a search engine those questions, they want answers from them too. They want the briefest question that answers them best.
Very good. And
search engine can do that.
It's as simple as that. So, Bill, what would be a pro tip that you'd give to our audience today?
Start out with the page and think about all the things that are missing in it, all the people, all the statements. Look at similar pages on the same subject that cover different things and ask, why do they have this topic? Who else has this topic? Who else writes about it? Which is a better source of information? Let's look at a lot of pages about the same topic and see what they all cover.
Mm-hmm.
What things tend to show up most? Where's my version of that? Where's my answer?
Got to look at the gaps. Very good, very good. Well, is there anything that we can promote for you? You've certainly done well for us, and we certainly appreciate you coming back the third time. What can we promote for you right now?
I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I try to come up with new things there,
mm-hmm.
Answer questions, and so on. It's fun. I blog a bunch at SEO by the Sea and Go Fish Digital. And I'm trying to come up with new approaches to things. I see patents. Sometimes I'll break down all the sources of information in those patents and link to where they come from, where all the citations are from, to provide more information about those. To the best patent I come across is one that raises the most questions. The one that makes me look at it and say, how can I test this?
Yes. You kind of start looking at what the next future is and you got an interesting position because you're continually trying to put the pieces together, and deliberately so. They're patent submitting things that have very narrow descriptions and concepts, but you're putting the puzzle together for us, Bill, and we certainly do appreciate it. So thanks so much on what you're doing, and we wish you all the best in the world for shining light regularly for us in SEO. Truly do appreciate it.
It's part of the fun.
Absolutely.
It's like having a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and having no idea what's behind the curtain.
You have no idea what the picture is.
Yeah.
And they're all colored blue. Well, you know what? Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Certainly, go out to the beach and dip your toe out there, because we're certainly happy with everything that you provide for us, and feel that you have a job well done communicating to our SEO community. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. Want to make sure that you follow Bill on Twitter at Bill_Slawski, as well as go over to LinkedIn. You find him, Bill Slawski, or just IN/Slawski, SLAWSKI. Watch Bill as he's continually providing These blog posts are deep reads and deep analysis into different patents that are being submitted regularly. And we certainly welcome our audience to go check out all of Bill's content out there. So we're certainly going to put all the links inside of our show notes, but we do want to thank him for his time today. All right, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Edge of the Web on YouTube. And if you're really feeling up to it today, drop us a quick review on iTunes. Let us know how we did on this show in particular, because this was a proud moment for us to be able to unpack these key concepts into the future of SEO. Thanks to our sponsor, Site Strategics, and be sure to check out all the must-see videos and much more of the insider information over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. Remember, from all of us, be safe, be well, and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.